All right, Black Box Radio. We are in the box. It is Monday, and we're in the community corner. So I'm here with my co-host. I got Toín with me, and we have an amazing guest tonight. Amazing. But first, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Queen, and I'm from Black Box Radio. I'm a host here, and we are a media platform for Black excellence, and we're based in Baltimore. And so we disseminate information to the Black community. We humanize our experience. We talk to platform Black people, platform Black experiences. That's what we do in Baltimore City. So tonight, I am co-hosting with my guy, Juan from Hope. Introduce yourself, brother.
Antoine Qualzell, hey Baltimore, founder of Hope Baltimore, helping oppressed people excel with sustained support on education empowerment, barrier relief around oppressed communities and those oppressed by convictions upon their release and returning back to the city, working with their families on their own, trying to find a job. Must be empowered, educated about the barriers that keep us in red line situations, but there is freedom once you understand how to navigate through those things.
Excellent, excellent. Like that, Tuan. So we're in the corner, and the community corner is a place where we speak to community leaders or people who are just doing amazing things in community. And tonight we have, you guys got to know this book, The Black Butterfly. It's hot.
Absolutely.
Hot. It's fire.
Absolutely.
Let me tell you that butterfly is on fire. It is. It is a must read. You guys got to pick up. You got to pick up. But tonight we have the author of that study, Dr. Lawrence T. Brown. Welcome to the box. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We're glad to have you. And Torn, I just found out he lives in Baltimore. So
Awesome.
This is
I mean,
awesome.
I mean, some of the things last night, I mean, I had the book and, picked through it. But last night, I had my phone and the computer and with the music. So I got in with it till about 4 this morning, and absolutely, bro, you touched a lot of valuable points that and only a person living here would like really see it, but understanding like the education platform, once you have an understanding about what it is automatically we lived in it all our lives.
Right.
Wow. Okay. I hear that. So, Dr. Brown, tell us a little about yourself. Tell us how did you get to this point where you became an author to write a book that's so amazing. Just tell us a little about you, your education, and what you're doing now.
Well, it really all started back when I was a child in West Memphis, Arkansas. That's my hometown.
Okay.
And I was raised in a family of out of the Christian tradition, and really just learned a lot being a child in the Deep South. And I went to Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, and graduated from there in 2001. Then University of Houston, graduated 2004. Then I went to the University of Tennessee Health Science Center in Memphis and earned my doctoral degree in 2011. And it was at that point when I came to Baltimore, and while I was a student at Morehouse, I saw like public housing across the street from where our college is located, and they were in the third phase of what was called Hope 6, a policy that under Clinton, and it was demolishing about 250,000 public housing units. So that was like my first sort of entree into like urban policy and trying to figure out what happens when people get displaced, because folks were getting uprooted. They didn't know where they were going. They had seen a lot of their neighbors already getting displaced. So when I came to Baltimore, I was introduced to East Baltimore and the community on that side of town. And I was walking down a block. Somebody was taking me down this block, and it was completely empty. It was the row houses were boarded up.
Mm-hmm.
And it just took me back to what I saw in Atlanta, like, except it was completely done in East Baltimore. And what I learned about was a project called EBDI, East Baltimore Development Incorporated. Johns Hopkins had uprooted like hundreds of families over there during the 2000s, starting with then Mayor Martin O'Malley. So that was really just sort of my way of getting introduced to issues here in Baltimore and learning a lot, and that really sort of helps explain how I dug into the book later on.
Wow, I like that. And that reminds me of the stages of policy that subsidizes gentrification. Like you just kind of, like that was 1 to 5. That's it right there.
Yep.
And so, man, it's so much to talk about. Baltimore is a beautiful city with a lot of everything in it. And that's one of the things that's in it. And so the Black Butterfly, it came from your experience of what you see happening in community, right?
Well, it was partially that. It was also looking at a map, a racial dot map, where it had one dot per person. And it was created by Dustin Cable, who was at the University of Virginia. It's online. Well, actually, I think they just took it off. But at the time, it was online. And I could see in East and West Baltimore these dots where African Americans lived, and it was in the shape of a butterfly. And it was 2015 in the springtime. So earlier that year or late 2014, Kendrick Lamar had released his hip hop album To Pimp a Butterfly. So I knew when I called it the Black Butterfly, I was thinking about like his album and how you can exploit something that's really beautiful, like a butterfly. And so that's where I figured, I looked at the map, I saw the pattern of a butterfly, and I said, I'm going to call it the Black Butterfly. And that's really where the pattern started, looking at a map. But it did match my experiences looking at and working with people in West Baltimore and in East Baltimore. But seeing it on the map is kind of what made it pop.
Wow. And it's really real. You see it every day. And when you see the blight in Baltimore, it's in that butterfly. And that white owl is clean as a whistle.
Yeah.
and it's just right in front of your face. If you don't believe it, just come see it for yourself. It's here. And so you gave solutions to questioning, like, how do we get out of this? It's so systematic. It's such a thing that just eats up community. How do we go forward from something? Do you think from looking at your book, what do you think is a good manner of us moving forward through this? Because it's so systematic.
It is. It's so systematic that I was able to look at some key newspaper articles back in 1910 and 1917. And they were saying that when Baltimore was first beginning racial segregation, Baltimore was the first city in America that passed a residential racial zoning law. It was under Baltimore Mayor John Barry Mahul on December 19th, 1910. Baltimore became the first city to really say formally by law that Black people could not move into white blocks. Not just Black people, black churches, Black schools, Black swimming pools, nothing Black could move into a white block, and vice versa. Nobody white can move into a Black block. So that formally split this city into two different realities. So looking at how Baltimore is ground zero for urban apartheid in America, and at the time the newspapers were saying in the New York Times, on December 25th, a week later, they were saying this is radical. This is we've never seen no law like this before. And they said it 4 times. This is a radical measure. This is radical. So when you ask me about the solutions, I'm thinking about how they described the policy. The policy was radical. So if the policy in real time, if they were describing the policy as radical, then that means the solution has to be radical too. That's where, for me, I go back to that history. And so that's racial segregation. Not first, but one of the first major displacements of Black people in Baltimore is across the street from Mercy Hospital. There used to be a Black community there. It was called Gallows Hill. You had Bethel AME Church used to be there. Union Baptist Church used to be there. famous black lawyer named William Ashby Hawkins used to live there, and they uprooted that community. And now, if you go there, it's a garden called Preston's Garden, which is named after the next mayor, James Preston, who was one of the most racist mayors in Baltimore. Well, I say the most racist mayor in Baltimore City history. And if you look at that article in the Baltimore Municipal Journal, it says, "Hey, in order to clean this neighborhood up, we got to do something radical." And so both displacement and segregation, the newspapers are saying these are radical things we're doing to get rid of black people or to segregate black people. So my thing is, if they knew in real time what they were doing was radical, then the solutions have to be radical as well. So that's why one of the solutions I talk about is Baltimore neighborhood reparations, because only a radical solution can heal a radical problem.
Wow.
I agree with you, bro. I agree with you. And like you say, like I was born in the 70s, and you know, like I understand the matrix of how coming up in Park Heights, that everything like Jewtown didn't start at Northern Parkway when I was coming up. It started at Haywood. Once you cross Haywood, you paid the 10-cent fare to be in Jewtown, you know. But as we was going to school and, you know, like neighborhood fights, beefs, and sending us to like Green Spring, to Pimlico or Garrison, because Northwestern became open to some students, that they moved it back to Northern Parkway. Then they moved it back to Glen Avenue, you know. And these are the things on the other side. It doesn't start on Reisterstown Road until you get to Patterson Avenue. Now, if you're on Reisterstown Road, now you're still in Park Heights, but if you're on Reisterstown and you're on Park Heights, Patterson and Glen Avenue are 10 blocks apart. So that's almost like a mile stretch, how one side is differentiated to be the county, but then on the other side, it's more closer because the housing development was more closer. You know, looking at in the 90s, when they first start knocking down like 131 building Lexington Towers, you know, then Murphy Homes, but looking at the penitentiary was itemized in tiers the same way as both of those projects was. You know what I'm saying? The penitentiary had a fence on the level of the grill that went up the 10 levels, while 1058 had a fence on the outside that went up the 12 floors. You know, and these are like the studies and why they say in the science of the projects. And it was things like, when I was reading the book, out of like looking at the similarities from all these states. And when you look at it in Maryland, all the individuals that roundabout that come from these criminal states that wind up here in Maryland wind up sentenced right on the Mason-Dixon line. From Cumberland all the way back down to Hagerstown on the 3630 of Virginia, or the DMV of Virginia, Delaware, and the outskirts of Maryland.
Wow. I tell you, so that tells you that what we're seeing is we created systems, you know. It's not by chance. It's not by, you know, this, as you mentioned the stages in the book. It's a reasoning this is happening. And then they come and redevelop these same areas. So
I mean, I want to go to what my brother was saying about like public housing. First of all, like how the architecture is very similar to a prison. I mean, like barracks, it looks very similar. It's just in terms of, if you look at like how the layout of it is, that's one thing. But then looking at where public housing was placed in the 1930s. In 1937, the Housing Authority of Baltimore City was started. But money came from the federal government, but it was administered at the local level. Well, there were about 10, 15 original public housing communities. And look at where those public housing communities were placed. You mentioned Murphy Homes, Lexington Terrace. They were placed in the places where black people were more heavily populated.
Mhm.
You don't see no public housing up in Roland Park, in Mount Washington, in Guilford, in that White L. You don't see public housing, the original public housing in Baltimore City.
Nah.
Douglas Homes,
Yeah.
Poe Homes. You don't see, those weren't those are located in East Baltimore and in West Baltimore.
Yeah.
And then in South Baltimore, they had some put there around the water because the water was filthy back then. It was the wartime. So the industry in Baltimore was at its peak, building ships, all kind of stuff going on to help with the war, World War II.
Yeah.
So nobody with money wanted to live next to the water, and that's where they put public housing, like in Cherry Hill.
Yep, Cherry Hill. Yep.
Yeah, so public housing from the outset was meant to concentrate and warehouse black people into black neighborhoods and into environmentally polluted neighborhoods. And so that's when the public housing was built, back in the 1937, 1940. So when you talk about systems, public housing is another one of those systems.
Yeah. And how like they restrict you and force you and condition you back in areas, to stay subjected to that, and then like breaking other families. And Queen always emphasized on the structure thing about the separation model of demoralizing families. With Section 8, we're gonna give you a house, but no longer can the father be a part of your household. So this continues to grow up with an anger of the child not understanding or being talked to about it because they're just a child. You know what I'm saying? The parent struggling, trying to figure it out. But then, it's systematically being used more and more and more now with ongoing reverence for the House of Ruth and things of that nature. Roberta's house and things of that nature. These programs supposed to assist women, but yet systematically their fundings come from this. So it's only structured things that they can really do for the women like they're supposed to.
Yeah, I mean, that's been a real issue, like separating black families. I mean, you go back to slavery, when you selling the slave master and slave traders, and Baltimore was a big hub for slave trading.
Yeah.
And not just receiving enslaved people from Africa, but I'm talking about shipping black people as enslaved cargo from the harbor, from the inner harbor, Pratt Street, shipping them from Pratt Street down to New Orleans, down to Mobile, Alabama, because that's when cotton became king after 1790.
Yeah.
So black families have been getting separated over and over. And then in the 1950s, between 51 and 71, you had this policy in America and in Baltimore called urban renewal. I'll probably know about that because the black writer James Baldwin, he called it Negro removal. So that's up when they demolished the communities where black people live, not just urban renewal, but building highways through the middle of black neighborhoods like US 40 on the west side. People call it the highway to nowhere, or even Jones Falls Parkway, I-83. US 40 displaced 965 households. Now, how many people live? How big were black families back in the 50s and 60s? How many black people lived in a household back in the 50s and 60s?
Families.
It was big families. We had both of my parents had 10 siblings each. So you talk about a lot of people could have been living in those households. So thousands of black people, they tearing down houses, building highways through black communities, urban renewal. And that's also splitting apart families, splitting apart entire communities.
Absolutely.
So even while black people were gaining political rights, civil rights movement, you had the 64 Civil Rights Act, 65 Voting Rights Act, 68 Fair Housing Act. Even as black people are gaining political rights, black neighborhoods are being destroyed. And that is the thing that most people do not understand. And that was very heavy in Baltimore.
Wow. I mean, it's like a tumbling effect it's like you throw something at someone and you just keep working on the other side. So you hit them on the side too, you hit them on this side. So it's like these things keep coming and all the systems are working together and you can't win.
Yeah, I mean, because then you want to add, let's talk about the banks, the
Oh,
banking system,
Yeah.
and how they,
Yeah.
right? Finance, savings, and loans. They didn't lend. Many of them did not lend and give capital for small businesses, black small businesses, or for black homes, black mortgages
yeah.
in those communities, which is where black people were forced to live. So that means if you in a community, and that's called redlining. When you're in a community that's redlined, don't get capital. You
Yeah.
don't have capital to get a home. You don't have capital to build and expand your business. I always ask my students, what do you think is going to happen to a community that's starved of capital, where they don't get capital year after year, decade after decade? You
Yeah.
starve in the community of resources, of opportunity, of cash, dollar bill, y'all. So
Right.
when
Right.
people don't have resources, so now we add in that system. We're talking banking, finance, public housing. You got urban renewal, transportation, highways being built through black communities. So black communities are being destroyed in America. This happens all across America.
America, right.
And so when people wonder, well, what happened? Because a lot of elders know our communities were better. They were stronger. Even under segregation, black neighborhoods had more cohesiveness. Black neighborhoods had more togetherness. Black neighborhoods had more structure and discipline for youth.
Yeah.
But when you tear apart black neighborhoods, uproot them,
Mm-hmm.
displace people, build a highway through the middle of it, put public housing in it and nowhere else, then you're creating a recipe for black neighborhoods and black families to be undermined, to be demonized, to be marginalized, redlined, and subprime. So that is really what happened in this country.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And in every city that you look at, the same effects has happened. Like places where butterflies can or places where caterpillars can grow to be growing cocoons and flourish out, they chop down all the places where they could lay stable and get the nourishment, things for themselves to nourish and help each other. So now they becoming victims of a slaughter and then wind up slaughtering each other because they fighting over spaces and marginalizing each other. And one of the things that we always talk about trying to do to people is educate people on this so you can really understand that in order to grow out of something, we got to build together and see a vision, not for us, but for the children, you know what I'm saying? So that way they can do the same thing to prosper and see the benefits of it.
Absolutely. And that's why I say to prosper, for us to see the benefits, for us to have real solutions,
Reparations.
That is it. And not just reparations for slavery. That's 150 years ago. I'm talking about neighborhood reparations for what happened 50, 60, 70 years ago, 100 years ago, 20 years ago. I'm talking about stuff that's happened since slavery.
Yes.
I'm talking about how the city of Baltimore and all these other systems, they help destroy and defund black neighborhoods. Yeah. So if you're going to destroy and defund, you have to repair
and refund
damage. There you go. And that's why I say neighborhood reparations. That's how I know. That's if you got politicians running for office, that's how you can tell that they serious. Reparations, neighborhood reparations. That is the radical solution to radical problems.
But you know what the problem that is a great solution, but what I do see is a lot of these neighborhood associations are infected. You know what I'm saying? Because gentrification has infected the neighborhood association.
Yep.
So unfortunately, even in some of the neighborhoods that we want to bring back, the majority is not our people anymore.
Yep.
So who gets this money? Who distributes it? Who builds it? If we could do that, you know what I'm saying? I think that it is probably the only thing that's going to rebuild us is resources.
Right. I mean,
But
the way I wrote about it in my book was you have a council, a neighborhood council of 15 people, and they all have to be democratically elected. And you have maybe 3 seats for youth, 3 seats for elders. You have seats for, make sure you have gender balance, make sure you have representation of people that live in that community.
yes,
And then you take 10% of Baltimore City's budget, which a couple years ago, Baltimore's entire budget was about $3 billion. So 10% of that is 300 million. So you take the 300 million, you divide it by 15 or 20, the 15 or 20 most red line communities. So a community, let's say they get 25 million, and you got to do that for like 40, 50 years, if not more. But every year they're going to get 25 million or so. And then that council of 15 people, democratically elected, they get together and they meet with people that's in the community. Maybe they have an assembly. Maybe they meet with everybody else in that community. And they got to figure out, well, how do we want to spend this money? Let's put some money for scholarships for our children. Let's put some money for making sure people have real jobs. Let's put some money towards construction work, so we can not only have real jobs, but then rebuild the neighborhood, rebuild and renovate the vacant homes in the community. Do community gardens, boost safe streets so you have more violence prevention, drug treatment programs, get rid of lead in the community. So there are a lot of ways that a community can say, look, we're going to split and spend the money, our annual budget, in a certain way to tackle the problems that we have to repair the damage that was done. So that's how I say we could do that.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, you got a comprehensive plan, and
Yes.
and the good thing is you got a lot of faith in people, because
Yes.
to actually do the plan, because we got it. You're right. It has to be radical. It has to be intentional, because this was intentional.
Yes.
A lot of times they say, "Well, I raised the minimum wage. We'll give us 4 years to do it," and we clapping. So 4 years later, they give you 15, and by the time 4 years later, you need 30.
Right. Right.
you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So we need an intentional movement when it comes to these resources, but it's a valid argument. It's absolutely a valid argument. Now, the process, that's what I think a lot of times we have to see how policy is so important, and also our leaders who are in political positions, because these come through people. And in Baltimore, the mayor has all the power. That's how the system is set up. So you gotta have people in place who have your interests in place.
Absolutely.
That's sometimes we don't think about that, because we just, that's important too. It's cultivating politicians. What do you think about that, Brother Lawrence?
I think, the first place to cultivate our politicians is obviously in the home, but at a systemic level, I think we got to really look at K through 12 education. And that's where I think, the type of stuff in my book, I didn't learn about, a lot of people don't learn about until they get to college. And a lot of times they don't even learn it then. So it's really a travesty for Black children and white children and any other child in this city to not know the type of thing that we're talking about, to know that their city became the first city to pass a residential racial zoning law, to know that their city built highways through the middle of Black neighborhoods, their city put public housing in Black communities. Every school child should learn that. So when you have children learning, okay, here's how we got here. Here's how Black neighborhoods were defunded and destroyed. Now they become much more civically minded, so that when they become of age, now, and they're running for office, everybody knows, hey, this is what we went through. So we're going to need some radical solutions to these radical problems.
Absolutely.
And that's when you have mayors and mayoral candidates and everybody saying it, but we got to get to that point. And I think you're right. We got to create a knowledgeable group of residents and citizens that this is what they demand. We demand this because we understand what happened. We understand the history. We're very clear on it. And we're not just using no big buzzwords. No. We know specifics. We know the specific harm, And we know how each and every raggedy and racist system damaged our neighborhoods. Therefore, we know what needs to be done to heal them.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of group, that's the kind of residents, not just children, but adults. We need everybody to get to this point of understanding so we can all be clear and our politicians can be super clear. So that's where I think we need to go with that.
Okay, so you said the education of politician, but also you mentioned in your book hyper policing,
Yes.
and how it actually kind of started and how it's been fortified by policy, and from each president, each federal government, they've been a part of the hyper policing. Like they could not do what they do if they didn't have help.
Okay.
Yep.
So and a lot of people say, well, we need police, but do we need them to this, to the way that they're militarized and the type of stuff that they have that they can bring out in the public? It shouldn't. I don't think their own citizens should have to deal with a militia, and that's the police department. But you talked about that, and that to me was amazing. And that point is just something that you can't put it away.
No, you can't.
A lot of things I don't think people really look at is that the small practice is organizing tactical units, right? Where undercover, like, and like you say, O'Malley played a big part with pushing all these things. Smoke, all of them was a preparatory prey on bringing these things to fruition, right? And now we see where every time, like, they want to bring in extra force, it's from the U.S. Guards. And people don't even understand that that's their formality of how to really put you under martial law. Like during Freddie Gray, when they came in and tried to shut that community down, that's when everything exploded, because already they was hanging out late night, but then the beef, then the years of watching police beat on people, jump on people, running people's houses, people just like came together and like literally exploded and took a stand. But they martial law the whole West Baltimore because no buses was moving. SGTs and Humvees was monitoring small blocks where spotlights was at one end from the sky, and technology was utilizing. And this is one of the reasons, like when they tried to come in with this spy plane thing, we was very adamant about making sure that like this doesn't lead to these things on the ground. And now they keep going to Governor Hogan and saying, oh, we need help, we need to bring this in, and they running in hoods. And I even seen them go in a hood that's really resourceful over Fowles Point to look for a person that was from Annapolis, but now that's going to give the give and go that we can target all these hoods that's zone zip code with VOPs, with warrants, with high rates of crime, and this is how we need to shut it down and put it back in the op school to cause fear again.
Absolutely. I mean, as I say in the book, hyper segregation breeds hyper policing, because once you've locked Black people into identifiable neighborhoods and 95% and up living in that community is Black folks, well, now that's where you send the police. That's where you send a lot of these militarized units. Now, I say that, a lot of this started during the previous round of uprisings. So we're talking about in the 60s when you had like Watts, the rebellion in Watts in LA, 65. You had Newark and Detroit, 67. And then, of course, after Dr. King was assassinated in 68, 100 plus cities had uprisings in fury after his assassination. So what you had was then President Lyndon Baines Johnson. First, they had like the Law Enforcement Act of '65, and then I think it was the Safe Streets Act in '68. So that's where you had the beginning of the SWAT units. That's where you had the original police being sent to Black communities to help put down those urban uprisings. So that, and then Nixon was next, Richard Nixon, President Nixon. So then he came in, law and order. That was his thing.
RICO Act.
Right. So he wanted, that's when, so between Johnson and Nixon, trying to suppress Black uprisings, because people don't realize between like 63 and 71, there were over 700 uprisings in America. 700. Not just in the big cities. I'm talking about York, Pennsylvania, Cambridge. York, Pennsylvania, Cambridge, Maryland. Even in medium-sized cities, Black people was like, we not having it no more. So so policing was hyper policing really escalates on the back of this uprising, what a scholar named Peter Levy calls the Great Uprising between 63 and 71, when a lot of Black people were like, we're tired of all the mess. We're tired of our leaders being killed. So that's when I think, and then also you had the Great Migration, when a lot of Black people leave the Deep South between 1910 and 1970. You had 6.5 million Black people leave the Deep South. They trying to get out of Georgia, get out of Alabama. Why? Because of lynchings. Because Black cities were being destroyed, like Rosewood in Florida, or the Greenwood community in Tulsa, Black Wall Street. So they trying to get out of racial terrorism. And when they come to these more northern cities, Baltimore, Cincinnati, Chicago, Flint, Detroit, Philly, New York, when they get there, how do the cities respond? They increase the budget for the police. We have the data to show the city starts spending and investing more money in police when Black people come north. So that's letting us know that this move towards policing, this hyper policing, really is a reaction to Black people moving into these urban cities. It's a reaction to, instead of investing in Black neighborhoods, when Black people are saying we're tired of this and begin to strike back, instead of bringing in resources, they bring in police. In the 60s. Instead of bringing in more resources, they build more prisons in the 70s and 80s. So then when crack cocaine hits the street, 86, you have a lot of violence that begins to happen in these red line communities that don't have resources. And then you have more policing then under Clinton. You have more policing under O'Malley, under Smoke, everything that you're saying. So this history of policing goes back, I believe, to the Great Migration. Black people coming out of the South, and then the cities respond with more spending on police. And so I think that's where hyper policing is a function of, again, hyper segregation. If you quarantine Black people into neighborhoods where they are redlined, subprime, marginalized, and demonized, then the solution is going to be to send in militarized force to control them instead of sending in resources to support them.
That's the system. Okay, Anson said, listen to this. He said, concentrated poverty plus the influx of guns and drugs breed violence. The violence is used as a convenient excuse for repressive and excessive policing practices and to devalue the land. That's it. That's all the stages right there.
That's it. I mean, when you don't bring in capital, the redlining, the banks aren't lending for homes, the banks aren't lending for small businesses. After a while, the properties become blighted, values decline, and now you actually set up stage one for gentrification. So it's cheap property, so now people with money can come in, buy it up, and a lot of times the land is owned by the city. And so the city might, like, for instance, you tear down public housing. You mentioned that earlier. That's public land. You tear down public housing, and now you give it to a private developer So the private developer can build nice, fancy condos and charge a higher rent. And the people that live there, used to live there, they can't afford that.
Yeah.
So all of that, the red line, it becomes ground zero for gentrification.
So I'm telling you, the practice and the policy, they are hand in hand. They're married. Wow.
They are. They pick the training team to educate them for years and then say, okay, you'd have learned enough. We feel that you got a good relation. You know what I'm saying? Now we're going to put you in to see what you really do. And it has really been shown. Like, I think here in the city, like, it's really been shown. And now certain team players are fighting against each other to get the spotlight to wear the crown for it. And winning people over because of what's being promoted immediately or by media to say that, okay, this is not what we done. This is, I can fix that, trust and believe, and then finding common ground to keep the rulership going and being selected to be in as the savior when all in real, they ain't gonna do nothing but put them in a cocoon and gas them for air.
Yeah, that's a perfect description of Black neighborhoods being put in a cocoon and gasping for air. Even the leaders that are oftentimes elected, they're depending on campaign finance contributions from wealthy white corporations.
Yeah,
they're depending on contributions from real estate developers. You know, so. And there's the old saying, you know, he or she who has the gold makes the rules. Well, if we don't have the money to support our own politicians, then the ones that do get in there, they won't be supporting our interests. They're going to be supporting the corporate, the developers' interests, not ours.
Yep.
We have to understand that they are supporting the people who give them the money.
That's it.
They might be Black, but they still have to support who gives them the money. And we're so marginalized, oppressed, suppressed, regressed. we can't afford to put money in the politicians and do that. We're just trying to eat, try to stay alive. Wow. So it shows how everything you miss because you're put in these situations to continue. You have to continue to fight out of these real situations, and they're every day. And then you have the government. You have the policing system. You have these red light tickets. If you got a car, that's a system that's peeling money out of people. You know, everything here is like to pull away from you, unfortunately. And it's a real process. And when you look at stories about Black communities, they talk about now. They never talk about why or how they got there. And so that's what your book brings out. The Black Butterfly it pulls all of the wool off your eyes. It tells you everything. Like, this is how it happened. This is where it happened. And now this is what we see. Am I correct?
Absolutely correct.
Wow, you did a masterful job. I mean, masterful job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, and I think on the flip side, it bears mentioning, you know, Baltimore is also America's original civil rights community. I mean, so much of the legacy of civil rights starts in Baltimore.
Is it?
I mean, yeah, you talking about, you know, the Stewart sisters in West Baltimore, how they fight against a steamboat company that segregated them and put them on the bottom deck in 1884. You're talking about William Ashby Hawkins, Du Bois, who comes to Baltimore. The NAACP starts in Baltimore in 1909. I mean, then you have, you know, before the Greensboro sit-in movement in the 60s, Morgan College students were doing that in the 40s and 50s.
50s, yeah.
They were fighting. They were doing sit-ins over at Northwood Plaza. All kinds of the theater that was there, the ice cream parlor that was there. You had Black youth that were protesting against the drug store. I can't remember the name of it. Reed's drugstore, I believe.
Reed's. Yeah, Reed's.
They were so black in the 40s and 50s before the civil rights movement nationally kicks off in the 60s. Baltimore is already doing it. And so, I mean, the flip side of all this mess, you know, you had the Afro-American, you know, powerful black newspaper at the time. So you had black resistance, black resilience. That's also taking the Goon Squad, you know, those brothers that come out and they're getting Perrin Mitchell elected. They're getting the judge elected. They're transforming the political system. They defeat, you know, Walter P. Carter. You know, they defeat the original Jim Crow. The only problem is Jim Crow came back, like Malcolm X said. Every racism like a Cadillac. It come out with a new version every year. So I mean, we're dealing with Jim Crow 2.0, but they defeated Jim Crow 1.0. So I mean, that's the other side of the story is the resilience, the brilliance, the resistance that black activists and organizers. Baltimore is the original civil rights community. West Baltimore in particular, and that's a legacy. You know, you got Billie Holiday, you got the jazz tradition, Chick Webb, you know, all of this, Cab Calloway, this rich history in Baltimore of black people being brilliant, creating solutions, defeating Jim Crow. That's also the other side of the story as well. So it's also important to lift that up.
Yeah, I'm telling you, that brings a lot of texture to conversation of resilience and just who we are. And we have to hear that. We always hear how things happen, but we also have to see how we stand through it and we keep going. You know, I got this thing that I'm trying to share. So you guys bear with me. I'm going to try to share this document. Let's see if I can share it.
Yeah, I know. Like you said, Billie Holiday from the 1600 of Pennsylvania Avenue to the all the way up to 1700.
Do you guys see this map on the screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, you see that map is the Baltimore eviction risk map. And you see how it's extremely high and above normal on the outskirts.
Yep.
And then you see going through the middle, normal, low, extremely low for evictions.
Yep.
So that is like almost saying what you said.
Yeah.
And this is the eviction risk map.
I think there was research. Yeah, there was research saying, you know, black women are the most likely to be evicted as well. On top of that, so
on top of that, care providers, home providers, and caretakers.
Absolutely.
Because we did a research and found out that 58% of Baltimore care providers are felony convicted women.
Wow.
You know. And when we was looking at that, I was like, so they stuck in the web of trying to come home, get their lives together, but got to take care of their child, got to report the PO, got to be discriminated because they got a case, can't get but limited service because based upon whatever type of charges they got, then fall under the victim of unit rules based upon whatever type of charge it was. It can't be expunged within the 3-year rate, depending on if the other charge was inexpungible. So now this child grows up being affected towards that and being placed in a broken school system that's going to automatically put them in the school to prison pipeline.
Wow.
Not to mention many of these homes have lead in them. So the children are exposed to toxic lead. You know, while they're being put out from home to home or living in homes that slumlords operate. So, you know, now you're talking about damaging the brains of our children, you know. So, yeah, it's I call it the lead poisoning to school to prison pipeline. So, it's that whole mix of toxicity. You know, it's not just the lead that's toxic, it's the policies that are toxic. It's the systems that are toxic. So, you know, that's what we're up against.
Toxicity. And then then the rate of addiction that pharmacy has placed in, and then use these methods of like they simultaneously helping you, but they clinically and legally put you on another narcotic that they based and created that's going to put you in a desperatory, disabled mission of being comatized, walking around like a zombie. So, like,
yeah, we got to figure out a better solution.
Yeah, we got to, man. Cause they
we have to figure it out. Your book definitely gives a testimony. It tells you, and it gives some ways out, and the question is, how do we it's so many, and they keep with new policy like the eminent domain law, as Nicole said, is there's always something where they're taking. And as you see now, there's some things going on in Baltimore, like in Poppleton and all of these places where they're trying to use this law to take out Black neighborhoods, and the developers and the neighborhood associations, everybody's in on it. It's scary, the things that's going on out here.
Like you said, taking away Black neighborhoods. And if you had to sum up my book in one sentence, this is it. That there's no way we can make Black lives matter if we don't make Black neighborhoods matter.
Right.
That's what my book is about. If you can't get to it, if you're not able to read the whole thing, I just gave you the one sentence synopsis. We can't make Black lives matter if we don't make Black neighborhoods matter. Because that's where the majority of Black people live. And that's it.
That's the breeding ground. That is the breeding ground. That's what has to come up. And that's it. You can't, it can matter, but if you breathe in trash, you're gonna breathe out some trash that matter.
There you go. I mean, if you poison the babies with lead, if you have them breathing toxic air like they are down in South Baltimore, if you send them to raggedy schools with no heat and no AC, if you send them with streets with potholes and build highways through the community, if you have banks that don't lend for businesses or homes, then what on earth are you expecting? You expecting Black people to be magical, and it's just somehow overcome all of these deep pathologies that we didn't cause for ourselves, and that's unfair. That's unfair to Black communities, and that's why we have to heal them.
And the only way is resources for a substantial amount of time.
Absolutely.
The repair needs to be generational because the hurt has been.
Absolutely.
And we see the manifestations of it, and we act like, well, why people are this way? We've been made to be this way.
And the onslaught of generational pain that people have endured.
Absolutely.
And these are the results of the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren, the great-great-grandchildren living out the effects of those fears and the repulse of those experiences all over again.
Yeah, we see it every day. And we say about crime, and then that's what we see the manifestation of crime. It's people surviving, and we see a lot of murder. We see a lot of chaos. It comes because you trigger the chaos by not funding the neighborhood, not funding the resource, not bringing resources to the neighborhood, not bringing resources to the schools. You are triggering chaos. You're triggering crime. So what do you expect to happen? For people to keep going to church and hungry? It doesn't work like that.
People need something to see validated that they can believe in.
People need everything another person needs. Shelter, food, good schools, good areas, grass, clean drinking water, no lead in your house. Just what every regular person needs. And then leave us alone. Damn it.
Yep.
What you think about that, Dr.
I mean, because you're so right that you could put white people in Black neighborhoods, and if you put them there and did the same thing you were doing to Black people, they would end up messed up too. That's
I guarantee you that.
Right. If you put people in raggedy and racist conditions, they're gonna end up a hot mess. And so I think that's the reality.
If
That's the
you
reality.
ever seen poor whites, you see hot mess.
Exactly. So I mean, it's you put anybody, nobody's superhuman. I mean, every now and then you got the one little black child or one little intelligent. They can rise above it. But for every person that's rising above it, you got 1,000 that won't make
That's
it.
falling. That's falling.
So it's not good to look at only the exceptional black person. We got to look at what's happening with all black children and look at how everybody's being impacted. And I think that's what we got to do.
Wow, that ain't radical. That's got to do.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not that radical. Once you understand this history, once you understand what I call in my book ongoing historical trauma, like you said, the intergenerational aspect of all this. I mean, if you understand that the pain has been tremendous, that the trauma has been tremendous,
yes,
then why wouldn't solutions also be tremendous? That's the only thing that gets me mad is when people want these itty bitty solutions to these monumental problems. That makes no sense. So that's the thing. That's how I say I know when people are serious when they bring solutions that meet the scale of the problem, and that's why reparations has to be on the table. That's why even for schools, I propose racial equity block grants because schools in redline community need an extra 2, 3, 4, 5 million each to deal with the issues that black children are facing in those communities. We're talking about, the police department really needs to be, in my book, I talk about firing all the officers at 11:59 p.m. and then you can hire back the ones that are decent officers at midnight, 1 minute later. And if you did that, you would get rid of the Baltimore Police Department and start the Baltimore Peace Building Authority, because you got to change the mission of the officers. Right now, the mission is war, tour of duty, surveillance, hyper policing, all these things. Even the titles, lieutenant, captain, major. These are all army and military titles. So they're already in the mindset. I'm going in to patrol, to war. I'm not there to protect and serve. So I have to reorient the model of law enforcement so that they are actually there to protect the vulnerable and to help, identify, like, all right, if this person's acting up, is it mental health? Are they lead poisoned? What's going on that could be, is it resources? What's really going on? So that, especially if it's nonviolent crime, you got to find a different way to actually channel that person into solutions or into building and boosting their life capacity. So, I mean, that's the kind of thing that I try to put forth in the book. These radical solutions to meet the radical problems.
Yeah. And Baltimore has it's such a beautiful city. And then you talk about the art in the city and the artists and there's so much creativity in the city. The festivals during the summer. It's just so many things going on here. And when the Ravens are on, all of that we love. But we got some other things here. And another thing that I see a lot in this butterfly is, even like in the black butterfly, we have a lot of sick whites. When it comes to every white and when I say that, a lot of addicts that I see in our neighborhoods, I see, they're displaced with us as if, that this is where you do that. You get what I'm saying? They don't do it. And I see white kids all the time coming into the neighborhood and walking and they look high and they look like they got some issues. That's a problem in Baltimore that I see all the time. You know what I'm saying, Twan? I see it all the time.
Yeah, that's something over years have been pushed here, because at one point in time, they wouldn't even hang in this city. But over time scale, things have been made measurable to be sociable and accepted. And like, I see white boys pitching and I'll be like, but one thing I say that, like, people in struggling communities have always found ways to do things of hustle. That was something of low-impoverished white people that came in with that begging thing. You know what I'm saying? Because before, like, you know, and I can't say in other cities. I can only say what I know and seen here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I know the mentality. If they can get away with it, yeah, give me one too. I'm gonna do the same thing. But it shows the low self-esteem of where we allow ourselves to fall in a fallen state. And until we find a measured way to like uplift some people and give them a picture that they can be uplifted, they're going to continue to stay in fallen states. And the government is winning and economically building for their future off us in them fallen states.
Absolutely. And you got, you know, a lot of low income white people like in Southwest Baltimore, Pigtown, Morrow Park, down in that part of the city.
Exactly.
And research shows the same thing I said earlier, that if you put white people into red line communities, they will end up a hot mess just like the black people.
Everybody else, yeah.
It's not that these people are lazy, shiftless, trifling, and up to no good. They're in a community that's red line, marginalized,
That's right.
subprime, and demonized. That's
right.
what the case is. You put
Get
anybody
caught up in the
those
mix.
communities,
Yeah.
yeah, they're gonna end up a hot mess. So I think that's why you have to have the resources, because there are a few white people in these type of communities too.
Yeah.
And not just that, you have people who are substance users. Oftentimes they'll come in from the suburbs into the city.
Yeah.
And that's where
they're coming out of neighborhoods. Yeah.
That's where they'll be engaged in these activities. I was on a jury trial a couple years ago, and it was a young white girl. She came to the city from Harford County, and she got with this black boy to go send him to go get her drugs that she could take back out to Harford County. And she gave him her car so he could go. And so they were like, well, he stole the car. And it was like, no, his lawyer was like, he didn't steal the car. This lady gave him the car to go get her drugs. She told owner, she said, because the charge wasn't drugs, the charge was, did he steal the car?
Right.
And when she told the story, it was like, well, dang, she said he was getting her drugs, so he didn't steal it. She gave him the car to go get her drugs. And unfortunately, this young white lady passed away. You know, the opioids don't play, that fentanyl don't play, and it's killing black and white.
Everybody.
So that's real. You got white people that come in from suburbs, and they'll go to these red line communities so they can get high and get their supply.
Absolutely.
And so there you go. It's absolutely real. So and what happens in black neighborhoods eventually is going to get out and reach white neighborhoods too.
Yeah.
That's why we got to heal black neighborhoods and make them the center of the story, because everybody's going to do better.
Mm-hmm.
Even the white people that live in those communities or that try to come in to these communities, they're going to do better too.
They're going to do better. Yeah.
These communities in shape.
That is so true. The experience around us, everyone is experiencing it anyway. So just make them nicer. Make the experience a nicer experience, a more resource experience, and you'll get better outcomes. You know, it's the process of who's making the actual decision is the most fearful. The folks who make the decisions are the most fearful, are the most oppressive, and we all have to live under that. And it's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. Thank you for the black butterfly. I tell you that. Thank you for that. Are you writing anything else? What are you doing?
I am thinking about writing a book called Building the Abolition Democracy. That's what I'm thinking about putting pen to paper on next. Because I think, you know, a lot of people especially after George Floyd was murdered, you heard a lot about abolish the police, abolish the prison industrial complex. And my thing is, you know, the original person who talked about that was Dr. W.B. Du Bois. And he, in his book, Black Reconstruction in 1935,
right.
Wow.
He was 80 some years ago, he was talking about abolition democracy. And he didn't say get rid of the police. He didn't say get rid of prisons. What he said was that the state had to use force to protect marginalized and vulnerable people, Black people who were formerly enslaved.
Wait,
So in other words, he said, if you get rid of them, you saying they don't have a responsibility. He's saying, no. The state has a responsibility
yeah.
to protect. We paying taxes. I don't know about you, but I'm paying taxes, hella taxes.
You better know it.
So if I'm putting in money to this thing, it sure better be working to protect me from white supremacists.
What?
It needs to protect our children from child molesters.
Yeah.
It needs to protect everybody from these mass shooters come in and shoot up, killing up both 30, 40 people. These are the types of things that the state, we have to say it does have an obligation. Don't just get rid of it. No, we paying taxes. It has to. It has to build an abolition democracy. So I think in that book, I want to talk about how abolition, as Du Bois says it, is different from the abolition that we're hearing about today. And he was actually the original. So we need to listen to what he was saying.
So that's next to come. We gotta be looking for that. Okay. And the Black Butterfly is doing well, right? In sales.
Yes. You
getting that bag, bro? You getting the bag?
Well, I only got 10% of the wholesale price. Now, if I was getting 50%, I would really have that bag. But royalties aren't as high as I would like them to be. But it is doing well. I think it sold about 7,500 copies last year, the first year that it was out. So
that's what's up, man.
That's what's up. That is what's up. Listen,
for a scholarly book, that's really good. It's not a Harry Potter book. We're talking about a scholarly book. That's really good for a scholarly book.
Yeah, and listen, you got to pick this book up, The Black Butterfly, especially if you live in Baltimore. If you live in Baltimore, it explains it all, but particularly this is happening and being applied to a lot of different cities. It's just in different ways. It's still a systematic process that they practice and they use policy to restrain you. And it's being done to marginalized communities and usually the Black communities. It's a policy for us. So it's really unfortunate. And the Black Butterfly, you got to pick that thing up, guys. Please. I'm telling you. What you think, Twan?
Better. You in the living cause of what it talks about every day.
Mm-mm.
You the study, you the project.
Absolutely.
You are the evidence of the data that other cities are rebuilding themselves off of your experiences. So, definitely get it. Get the Black Butterfly. I'm trying to tell you, get it.
Get the Black. Let me tell you, it's so beautiful. I don't want to mess up I got it sitting here without it's still a black book. See that? The Black Butterfly. I got it sitting without its cover. I'm trying to keep the cover pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you signed this thing for me, so I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
But
the last thing I'll say is that it's also an audio book. So if you don't feel like reading it, Lady Breon, a spoken word poet in Baltimore, she's the narrator, and she is a fantastic listen.
Okay, and where would people find all of this stuff? The ebook, your regular book, you selling out your truck? How we get to those?
Thank God I'm not selling out my truck because I'm a bad salesperson if I gotta sell it sometimes. But I say go to the independent bookstores, especially Urban Reads bookstore, which is Black owned. You can go to some of the other independent Greedy Reads, Charm City Books. If you can, don't buy it off of the big retailer online. I'm not even gonna name them, but go to Baltimore Independent Bookstore. You can pick a copy. And then the audiobook, it's on Libra FM. Libra FM is on audiobooks.com. So I think there's 5 major ones that you can check it out on audiobook as well.
Okay, I'm going to definitely look that. Lady Beyond, and she's a fantastic orator. So that's what's up. That's really fly. Brother Brown, I really appreciate you coming in, and you got to come see us again. You're a man with a lot of knowledge.
Yeah.
And you over there at Morgan, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and I graduated from Morgan. So
all right now.
Yeah. So I love that. We got some greatness over there. Morgan spreading like mayonnaise over there, bro.
Yeah, we getting some of that good state, our tax dollars. We get because HBCUs have been underfunded. So slowly but surely, I think the advocates won the court case to try to get more funding. So, you know, advocacy works, you know, agitation, protests, you know, court cases. And so we're living, I think, evidence of that, you know, between Coppin and Morgan, if we can build up and get our young people in there to really, you know, be educated, you know, we can help turn this thing around.
And it's so amazing. Morgan now owns the Northwood Plaza that they used to go and that was so segregated.
Yeah,
so today it is now property of Morgan State University. The students are one of the first who had to sit in the same plaza that now the university owns.
You know, there's this picture of two black women, 2 black men, and they're holding the victory sign up after they desegregate Northwood Plaza. And it's a picture for them holding up the victory sign. And I told somebody I would love to see a statue of those 2 black men, 2 black women holding up the victory sign, a statue, so that everybody can go and pose and take their picture. I'm here with
I would like to see that picture.
You know, the victory, right? The picture is amazing, but add a statue in front of Northwood Plaza. Man, that would just be powerful.
You need to hit what's his name?
Brother
David. So listen,
you bring your kids on the tour. Come on, baby. This when you go to college and they be like, yeah, look at that statue. Go take a statue like victory. We're not just talking about we losing. No, we winning. we will win in the end. We shall overcome. So I think that's that picture is just one of the great testimonies that, in fact, we don't. It's not just a history of trauma. It's also a history of victory as well.
I tell you what, on that note, bruh, we are boxed up and out. The Community Corner on 4/11/22. We've had Dr. Lawrence T. Brown.
Oh, I saw in the chat, everyone's place. Yes, you can go.
You see that?
I'm not going to you talking about me, man.
You don't want to get put out the community.
I said it, everyone's place.
Brother Nati, you want to get put out the community, you better.
Right. Y'all, my apologies.
Yeah. So anything else? Because we don't want to get you in no trouble, bro.
That's right. No trouble. I love y'all. Thank y'all for inviting me. I really appreciate it. And it's been a real honor.
Absolutely, bro.
We really appreciate you. Listen.
Appreciate you, my guy.
I will definitely keep in touch with you, Brother Lawrence. And thanks for writing this book. We needed this. It is definitely a blessing to the culture, for sure. So we box up it out. This is a deuces sign too. It's victory, but it's deuces too.
It's always victory.
Can we get that
It's always victory, man.
Always victory.
Always.